Hello there. Donald Trump's return to the White House has reignited tensions and worries in US foreign policy. His assertive stance on China is reshaping global trade, while his unpredictable relationship with Europe challenges transatlantic unity. President Trump has swiftly reshaped US foreign policy by withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement and the World Health Organization, imposing tariffs on Canada and Mexico, and pressuring Russia to end the Ukraine conflict. These bold moves are redefining America's global role, prompting both allies and adversaries to recalibrate their strategies. As global powers reassess their positions, the balance of power shifts, raising critical questions about the future of international alliances and diplomacy. Welcome to Think Tank.
Donald Trump is his name, and he's there to stay.
As unlikely, impossible, is now reality.
America powerful. We will win, win, win. And we will make America great again. We will very quickly make America great again.
Now, the New York Times has reported that Honduras has taken a bold stand against President Trump's deportation policies, signaling a potential shift towards stronger ties with China. While most Latin American countries distance themselves from Beijing, Honduras sees these policies as a threat and is exploring economic and infrastructure partnerships with China to address foreign debt and aid pandemic recovery. Honduran President Castro hinted at expelling US forces from a strategic airbase, using it as leverage against deportation plans that could destabilize Honduran society. Despite this, officials have emphasized the importance of US relations, calling for dialogue to mitigate social fallout. Trump's protectionist policies raise a critical question. Are they pushing nations closer to China? Honduras' actions underscore shifting dynamics in Latin America. Meanwhile, Axios has reported that Trump has returned to Washington with a noticeably softened approach toward China, hinting at perhaps improved relations between the two powers. Recent discussions with President Xi Jinping focused on trade, TikTok, fentanyl, along with moderate tariff proposals, signaling a shift towards a more pragmatic cooperation. Beijing's warm response underscores the potential for mutual economic benefit. Balancing optimism with caution, Trump has combined calls for trade fairness with critiques of China's strategic moves, including its activity near the Panama Canal. His suggestion that China could mediate the Ukraine war reflects a more nuanced foreign policy. Despite this moderated tone, analysts caution against expecting a full retreat from Trump's prior hard-line stance. His positions on Taiwan and selective tariffs remain crucial to understanding the future trajectory of US-China relations. And the Financial Times has reported that the US dollar has witnessed its steepest weekly drop in over a year following former President Donald Trump's softened tone on China tariffs and calls for significant interest rate cuts. These remarks eased fears of trade disruptions, causing the dollar to fall by 0.7% against global currencies, benefiting the euro, sterling, and the Mexican peso. Trump's push for lower interest rates conflicts with the Federal Reserve's cautious stance, leading markets to slightly adjust expectations for earlier rate cuts. However, uncertainty surrounding monetary policy and trade dynamics persists. While Trump's comments provide temporary relief, analysts caution that tariffs and monetary policies remain key challenges. Meanwhile, Asian currencies like the yuan and the yen strengthened, signaling potential shifts in global trade strategies. Now, to talk us through this and provide more analysis, we are joined from Kentucky, by Dr. Ihsan El-Khatib, a political science professor, and from Washington by Mr. Ahmed Maharem, who is a political researcher. Thank you very much for joining us. Mr. El-Khatib, what do you make of this shift in tone from Trump on China?
Good afternoon. Yes, I mean, Trump is known as a known commodity by now. His position on China is known. The Chinese know what to expect, and there's nothing new. He thinks that China, for example, as to international organizations, should be paying more money, that the US is paying more than its fair share, for example. That's the example with the World Health Organization. The US paying $500 million, while China, with 1.4 billion people, paying $35 million. So the idea that his idea still is that Americans are being ripped off, and that to quote him, he says that stupid people in the past have negotiated deals with other countries where other countries have taken advantage of the US. So his position as to China is the same, using tariffs on China to encourage manufacturing in the US.
Mr. Maharem, what do you think of Trump's softened rhetoric on China?
Repeating that he will be very quick, make America great again, and that's true. He is smart as a businessman and also as a political man. For second period in power in the White House, I think for the first time, he had some kind of good deal with the Chinese president, no matter how the war in trade between the both countries. But I think he was always keeping an eye to keep China from one point and Russia both in a good deal with America, because the future is not going to be Middle East or Europe. The future of any influence to America, economy, politically, will be from the East, from Russia and China. And both of them has influence in different agendas to the Middle East, to Africa and Europe as well. So I think from his point, he will concentrate this time to have some kind of pressure from point and guarantee to have a good deal, commercial, in order to reach a kind of soft dealing with the next 4 years of his presidency to America, with China mainly.
And Dr. El-Khatib, Trump has talked about weakening the Federal Reserve's autonomy. What kind of effect might this have on the markets?
I think it's bad to do that, because there's this idea that they have a mandate, and they consider unemployment and inflation, and they're professionals, and they do what's good for the country regardless of politics. The idea of injecting politics into it is seen as not good, because you have different presidents, and there's this idea of political consideration, not economic considerations, because if there is an issue with inflation, they'll keep the interest rate high to tame inflation. And when they see a sign that inflation has been tamed, then they'll reduce the interest rate. But with Trump, what he wants to do is he wants to reduce interest rate, even though the Fed is not convinced that inflation is under control. But on the other hand, I mean, as a politician, he wants to deliver on promises. He wants to grow the economy, and interest rate is too high actually now. It's very high to buy a house, to buy anything. So as a political move, he wants that. But so the opinion is divided on this. I mean, if you talk to Republicans, conservatives, they say, okay, who's in charge of the executive branch? Which part of the government is the Federal Reserve? Is part of the executive branch. Therefore, the president should have a say. While others say that the Fed's independence is good for the country, is good for the economy.
And Mr. Maharem, just coming back to China for a moment, what is Trump's stance when it comes to Taiwan? And might this lead to some difficulties with China?
Taiwan matter is quite interesting and very complicated. And America, since years, I mean, from different governorate or, different potential, either from Democrat or from the other side, they're trying to keep that in progress. I think Mr. Trump, he knows exactly, and that very sensitive matter, and he would like to avoid any kind of war while he is in power. So I think he will do as much as he can with China to keep the relation in balance. There is no doubt America is supporting dramatically Taiwan, but from the other side, he doesn't want to make any kind of aggressive actions with China. So I think he will be keen interest to keep things going as much as he can. Till in the future, what will happen? Something can be a magic, but I think he is avoiding any kind of war or exaggerating the situation. So he will keep a balance between his relation with China mainly and Taiwan as well.
And Dr. Al-Khatib, one of the big worries for many people in countries around the world, like his first term, is Trump's feelings towards NATO. Could you foresee a possible recalibration of NATO's role under Trump's leadership in his second term?
I think that positions of Trump are almost always misrepresented. He is not an isolationist. The man is definitely not an isolationist. He understands American standing, American power, and he's not an internationalist. He says he's America first, he's an American nationalist. And American people are electing a leader for the United States, not a leader for other countries. And he should be out for the interests of the country, and probably in a rude fashion and blatant fashion, the way he does it. Others. As to NATO, he sees the point of NATO, but the way he dealt with it, and I've been in this country since '92, and since '92, the talk was NATO is important as a connection between the U.S. and Europe. This relationship is very important, and this institution, NATO is an institution that's a linkage between the U.S. and its European allies. Because the talk after the Cold War ended, what's the point of having NATO if there is no Soviet Union? And some people said it's important to have this institution that's a linkage between the US and its European allies, very important allies, which is good. But the issue has always been that these European countries do not spend the money that they're supposed to spend on defense. They don't. They just don't. And why they don't? Because they're free riders. They think, okay, well, they can count on the US, and the US has always been frustrated. But for the sake of being nice and diplomatic, and they don't push these countries. Why a country like Germany, that's an economic powerhouse, does not spend enough on defense? Why? They should. They have the money. They have the economy. Why? Because they count on the U.S. And that frustrated Americans through the decades, not years, decades. And then Trump came and made it an issue. He said, look, you have to spend as you promised, spend your share. And that aggravated them because they're not used to that language. They're not used to somebody speaking in that fashion. And then somebody irritated him by saying that, well, if you don't spend, are you going to defend us? Which is rude, actually. They're trying to antagonize them. And then he joked or he said, insensitive, said, he'll encourage Russia to attack them or something of that nature. But the idea is they have to pay. These people are members of a club, and they have committed to spending the money, and they need to spend the money. NATO is important. I don't think he wants to end NATO. It's exaggerated what he said. He said, spend the money. And I think they have moved toward actually meeting the goal of spending 2% of their economy on defense.
Well, some good points made there, Dr. Al-Khatib, on NATO for sure. We'll just stay there with you both of you gentlemen, because we're going to come back in just a few moments and continue our conversation. But first, we're going to watch a report on these ongoing developments. President Trump's first-term policies have reshaped global alliances, diminishing US influence and altering Europe's strategic outlook.
Donald Trump's first term as US President had a profound impact on America's international standing, particularly with European nations. His America First doctrine, driven by isolationist and protectionist policies, marked a sharp departure from the US's traditionally cooperative role in global governance. Notably, his withdrawal from international agreements such as the Paris Climate Accord and the Iran nuclear deal eroded trust among European allies, who viewed these moves as undermining both global security and climate cooperation. Trump's aggressive trade policies, including tariffs imposed on European imports, strained transatlantic relations. This protectionist approach, along with his preference for bilateral negotiations over multilateral forums, further distanced the US from Europe. This created a strategic vacuum, enabling powers like China and Russia to assert themselves more prominently on the world stage. The shift in US foreign policy also fueled concerns within Europe about NATO's future. European leaders voiced increasing doubts regarding America's commitment to collective defense, which prompted discussions on greater European defense autonomy and deeper ties with other global powers, particularly China. This dynamic marked the early stages of a power realignment, with Europe recalibrating its diplomatic strategy in response to Trump's foreign policy. As the US retreats, China's ascent continues, with Europe cautiously engaging in deeper relations with Beijing. Trump's second term could intensify this trend, weakening the US's global influence and accelerating a more multipolar world order. In sum, Trump's policies during his first term reshaped global alliances, diminishing European confidence in the US and facilitating the rise of other powers.
Well, I'm still here with my guests on the program. We have Dr. Ihsan Al-Khatib, who is in Kentucky, a science professor, political science professor, and also from Washington, Ahmed Maharam, who is a political researcher. Thank you very much for staying with us. I'll come to you, Mr. Maharam. Trump, of course, back in the White House. How does Trump being in the White House change the balance of global power, especially when it comes to countries like Russia and China, the adversarial states? Does having Trump back in the White House make America stronger?
Definitely, it will make America stronger because for the first time in the recent years, America has faced a lot of challenges, and it seems like from period to period, it shows that it is still globally has kind of very important impact. So many problems in the Middle East, in Europe, around the world. I think America has to do something positively on it before coming to the White House in a day. He succeeded already to make a good deal between Hamas and Israel to stop the war for a while and to have some kind of peace. Hopefully will come in the future. Again, he said he will be capable and strong enough to stop the war between Russia and Ukraine. And I think he is in a communication with his team that very soon I think he will meet and discuss this point with President Putin. I assume that his capability as a leader and man of word, mostly all what he promised his citizens in the first time and even in the second time to be in power, I think he is capable. Even there is so many difficulties will face him to apply all what he promised, but I think with his power as second time in service in-house, he will make really America again, and most importantly, not only America again, but the world is more safe and confident. Yes.
And Dr. Al-Khatib, we mentioned earlier in the program some reports from news outlets saying that perhaps Trump's protectionist America First policies create opportunities for China to deepen its ties with nations in Latin America, for instance. Do you think that's a possibility?
That's possible. Yes, that's possible. And but these countries have to also they realize that China is not a non-profit organization. It's not a humanitarian entity, actually, and it might do to them what it did to Africa, and where it ties them down with debt. So any power is looking out for its interest, and the Chinese are looking out for their interests. But yes, they have been deepening their ties with Latin America, and they are upset, these countries, Latin American countries, Central American countries, with the idea of clamping down on illegal immigration in the U.S. So while the relationship defined with the U.S. by this immigration issue, which aggravates them, then there is getting closer to China at the same time. But they need the U.S. more than the U.S. needs them, actually. And the U.S. can't just have open borders. I mean, the American people don't want that. And especially with deporting the convicted criminals, there are people who are committed crimes, and by law, they have to be removed from the country. I mean, it's not Trump did not invent that. The law is that certain crimes result in somebody being removable from the country, and that they have to be removed. And the issue is to put more manpower into enforcing this law to make the country safer. And this is actually very popular in the U.S., removing the criminal convicted immigrants.
And Mr. Maharam, America first when it comes to Europe and the relations with Europe. And many people, many leaders in Europe worried about the possibility of tariffs. Europe's massive trading partner is the United States. Do you think there will be a renegotiation of these transatlantic ties?
Actually, he's not happy with the previous administration. Biden, billions of dollars and a big amount of weapons were giving to assist and to help Ukraine, but the result on the ground that it is not easy for Ukraine to come and make any victory. Russia is still occupying 4 big areas in land, and it seems like it will never withdraw back. So I think his, administration of Mr. Trump is to be more realistic and optimistic. He is doing actually or facing more pressure to the European leaders in order to convince them in the future they have to buy from America gas and petrol more than from other countries, and they have to raise their share in NATO. And he usually tell them, if you would like to have our support and our troops to help you and save Europe, 1%, 2% about your income is not enough. It has to be 4 or 5%. But I think finally, European countries have suffered a lot for the last 2.5 years from the results of Ukraine. I assume that good results Europe are expecting.
And the war in Ukraine. Is that realistic, or is this Trump just trying to signal that he doesn't want America to be the world's policeman anymore?
I mean, China has good relations with Russia. Russia is suffering major losses in Ukraine. I mean, Trump feels bad for the death and the suffering on both sides. As a human being, he said he's upset by the massive death on the Russian side, on the Ukrainian side. This war should not, I mean, it doesn't hurt the United States, this war. This war is a European problem, actually. It's not an American problem. It's in Europe's backyard. That's why he's frustrated that Europeans should be more responsible for the war, because it's in their neighborhood. They should be the ones spending the money, and this is their problem. But they have been dealing with it as if it's America's problem first. That's what annoyed him. And American people too, they think that why should we spend the money? The Europeans are rich; they should be spending more than we do. So that was one issue. Now China has good relations with Russia. I think the Russians want to get out of this war. Putin has suffered massive blows in Ukraine. 600,000 between dead and injured, if not more. Massive losses, military equipment, and the $300 billion that rainy day fund that they put in the Western banks, they were seized basically. So Russia is in a bad position, and Ukraine is in a bad position because, as Trump said, Ukraine is a lot smaller than Russia. Russia can fight for the next 50 years, but Ukraine won't last another 50 years. So he wants to end the war, but he doesn't want to mediate it with both of them acting as if the U.S. is desperate for them to stop killing each other. The U.S. is not desperate to stop them killing each other. It's in their interest to stop killing each other. And he threw this China idea. It's just a signal to Putin and to Zelensky that he's not desperate to have the breach real.
Well, it's been an excellent discussion, and thank you both for your brilliant insights. Ihsan El-Khatib, a political science professor, joining us from Kentucky, and Ahmed Maharam, who is a political researcher, joining us as well on the line. Thank you both for being here on Q News. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of Think Tank. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.